Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Cam. Welcome back to the 1996 Project. And the selection is quite eclectic this week, but it's not without variety nonetheless. Let's just get right into it. Let's take a look at Fear. Fear was directed by James Foley, who had previously directed Glengarry Glen Ross, Always Be Closing, and 50 Shades Darker and 50 Shades Freed.
Penis cancer.
It starred Mark Wahlberg, Reese Witherspoon, and William Peterson, among others. It tells the story of a young woman named Nicole, played by Reese Witherspoon, who meets a young man named David, played by Mark Wahlberg, while they're playing pool together. They immediately hit it off, and it seems like David is just too good to be true. That's because he is. He's a bit of a psycho. And, well, yeah, he pretty much snaps and tries to make Nicole his forever. Not if William Peterson has anything to say about it, Dr. Will Graham himself. So this movie's really interesting to me because this is not the first thing that Mark Wahlberg was in. I believe the year prior he was in a movie called The Basketball Diaries with a very young Leonardo DiCaprio. And then he was in this, and a year after this was one of my favorite movies of all time, Boogie Nights. So we're seeing very, very, very young Mark Wahlberg here, and he is a creepy man in this. I give Mark Wahlberg all the credit in the world. Like, he looks and sounds the part. I give him all the credit in the world for that. There's just a few scenes here where I'm just like, oh, yeah, that would not, that, wow. You're really pushing it there, guy. He's a master manipulator, and he just knows how to work Nicole just like Play-Doh. Because Nicole, played by Reese Witherspoon, doesn't really know any better. And she's just new to all of this, and she doesn't know any better. And then you got William Peterson, who's just suspicious of everything, like a dad should be. But there's this whole is the dad just scared of letting his little girl go, or is there actually something to this? And there's a lot of that going on there, and it's mostly pretty good. The thing about this one, though, is that sometimes it goes a little bit too over the top for its own good. Take, for example, a couple of music choices where it just tries to make Wahlberg more intimidating than he is, where it's like a woo, like a music cue, and it just cuts to him, and I'm just like, don't do that with the music. Just let him do the ice cold stare, and that'll do the trick for you. But they tried a little too hard in some cases, and it didn't really work. Not to where it just kills the movie, but it's definitely noticeable. When it goes over the top, that's when it gets pretty sad in places. This has definitely got a whole 90s aesthetic to it, just from the soundtrack. I mean, Bush is on the soundtrack for this movie, and the cover of Wild Horses by the Sundays is on this one. So yeah, the 90s are all over this one, which is both a good and a bad thing. But the movie succeeds in being tense all throughout. Like, there's a good mystery surrounding this. I'm going to give this a good rating, but a high good rating. It sometimes gets a little high on its own supply, but the performances are all strong. There's a really good ending, and this one does get a recommendation. And I can definitely see why Wahlberg and Witherspoon specifically would go on to have the careers that they had. Left into family movie territory and some childhood trauma. This is James and the Giant Peach.
With something wonderful for everyone. Walt Disney's James and the Giant Peach.
James and the Giant Peach was directed by the guy who actually directed A Nightmare Before Christmas, Henry Selick, who had previously directed, the aforementioned Nightmare Before Christmas, and would go on to direct Coraline, among many other things. It is based on the legendary book of the same name, and it has the voices of Paul Terry, Simon Callow, yes, Pete Postlethwaite, and Richard Dreyfuss, among others. And it tells the story of a young boy named James, whose parents die in the movie by a rhino that escapes from the clouds. That's just the first scene, folks. He lives with his two aunts who treat him just terribly, but is whisked away in a giant peach by some, I guess, worms that he eats and becomes a stop motion claymation character, and then meets, among other things, a French goth spider who is also voiced by Susan Sarandon.
I can eat more marijuana than anybody in the world.
I have nothing else to say other than that. It's so out there and out of its mind and crazy, but I kind of love the energy of it. This is definitely not my favorite Henry Selick movie. That is Nightmare Before Christmas, of course, but I love the imagination on screen. Like, I love, especially when it goes to the claymation stuff, like when it's in the actual Peach itself and when they're on their adventure. It's just fantastic stuff. The imagination just leaps off the screen. Like, I'm a sucker for animation, specifically claymation, so this just checks all the boxes for me. There's some songs here and they're all really good. Really, the movie, just the imagination is just off the charts. When it gets back to reality, that's when things start to go a little south. Not too south, but definitely south. I hate the ants here. Like, Aunt Spiker and just the other aunt, I can't pull her name right now. Just, these two are just way too over the top for this movie's own good. Like, every time I see them, I'm just like, go away, please. And I get why they're there, and they are very effective, but I just hate their entire presence. And I just like look at now and like the giant rhino and how that scared me as a kid, and I look at it now, I'm like, is the rhino supposed to be symbolic? Why a rhino? Someone explain that to me. I need to know. But ultimately, I'm going to give this a great rating. I give it a little bit extra because of the claymation. Definitely parts where I'm like, this doesn't jive with me. But the imagination just goes leaps and bounds off the screen. Like, when it goes straight claymation, that's when the movie like really hits like a ton of bricks for me. Like, I love this, and Henry Selick just is a really underrated director in my opinion. We go from 2 terrible ants to just 1. But this is based on another legendary book. It's Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre was directed by Franco Zeffirelli, who had directed Romeo and Juliet and Jesus of Nazareth, among others. And it starred William Hurt, Charlotte Gainsbourg, and others. And this is an adaptation of the legendary novel by Emily Bronte. And this is the story of Jane Eyre. It's how Jane Eyre, played by Charlotte Gainsbourg, gets a job at Thornfield Hall, where she falls in love with Mr. Rochester. Or, well, Mr. Rochester falls in love with her first, and they ultimately form a bond. However, Mr. Rochester holds a secret, and it's up to Miss Eyre to see if she can live with that. So this is something that I'm not super familiar with. I thought I had read Jane Eyre at some point in my life, but it turns out, no, I didn't. So I went into this totally blind. And I liked it, but I didn't really love it. But first up, Charlotte Gainsbourg carries the movie. Like, she is great. She would go on to become a regular in Lars von Trier's films, and she really just crushes it here. Her younger counterpart, young Jane Eyre, is played by Anna Paquin, who just a few years after this would be in a little movie called X-Men. You may have heard of it. I thought for like a hot second it was just going to be Anna Paquin in the whole movie, but no, it hard cuts to Charlotte Gainsbourg, and I'm like, okay, didn't expect that, but here we go. But they both do their jobs very well. William Hurt can't do a British accent, I'm sorry to say. Like, he is passed on, I know this, rest in peace. He was good in a few movies, but here, his accent at best goes in and out and is at worst just non-existent. Like, what was Alan Rickman busy? Like, Stephen Fry? Like, get an actual, like, Brit in there to do something. Like, have a British actor in there. That's all I'm saying. But when the big twist happens, I at first was like, Rochester, you really buried the lead with this one. Like, you could have told your future bride to be this before the wedding day, but they tried to explain it away as like he was so ashamed of it happening and he was like bamboozled and hoodwinked. So I'm like, okay, it was the 1850s, so I'm pretty sure this just happened quite a bit, especially in England. But at the same time, I'm just like, you could have just told her this and you would have saved yourself a ton of heartbreak. But the movie does try to explain it, and it kind of works for me, I guess. Ultimately, this is going to get a good rating. Good performances, good atmosphere, some genuinely passionate moments. I don't know if this is the definitive Jane Eyre, but I need to see more of them. But I thought this one was pretty good. Do you think of any of the movies I've talked about? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.